You're listening to Health Innovators, a podcast and video show about the leaders, influencers, and early adopters who are shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy Mooney. Welcome back to the show, Health Innovators. On today's episode, I'm sitting down with Shawn Zimmerman, who is the VP of Product Development for Accureg. Welcome to the show, Shawn.
All right, thank you.
It is good to have you here. So I always like to start off by having our guests share a little bit about their background and what you've been innovating these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is computer science. So I have a computer science degree, and I had done an internship in a healthcare system here in Florida. And so I got my start really in healthcare. Wasn't necessarily something that I had planned for during studying computer science, but it's an internship and I got experience and learned that there's a lot of opportunity in healthcare. So ever since then, I've been in healthcare in different capacities, either working for a hospital as a consultant or as an entrepreneur.
And so what were you doing in that internship, and what were you doing as some of those roles that's kind of led you up to where you are today?
Yeah, so first started off with working with with 3 hospitals, and they had a old EHR system, and they were migrating over to Cerner. So I played a large role in those 3 hospitals migrating from their legacy system to Cerner. And it was a great opportunity coming right out of school, because part of my responsibility was to map the current processes of the hospital. And then work with the staff to show them this is how you're going to operate, or here's your new processes when we switch over to Cerner. So I got to learn a lot about patient access, a lot about clinical, and just really in how hospitals operate. So it just exposed me to a lot of the departments of a hospital, which is really a valuable experience, because, inevitably found some opportunities that were gaps between the legacy and new, and also just some of the challenges in the hospital. So it just really kind of opened my eyes to various opportunities.
So like ground zero of EHR implementation in a health system.
Yeah.
I bet that was a fun ride.
A big project, but yeah, it was a great learning experience. From there, I actually worked at a corporate level for this healthcare system, and was responsible for physician practices. So the hospital system would purchase a physician practice, and me as being part of a team, we would go in and, again, very similar, would map out the current process of that particular physician practice. And then we would actually install a new EHR system that was dictated by the healthcare system. So again, I learned acute in one setting, and then I moved to more of a corporate role and more of a travel role. But then I got to learn the ambulatory setting as well. So yeah, it was just kind of great, just getting those high level overviews and learning experience with both healthcare settings, because they do operate quite different.
And then you identified this problem that you decided to solve. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the challenge is with various EHR systems. Again, there's always gaps. There's not a single EHR system that's perfect. And what I had identified is, for outpatients that are coming into a hospital, there's a process where a patient walks into the front door, they check in at the front desk, notifies registration, and then also whenever registration's finished, the clinician needs to ultimately know, so that the patient can either have their imaging, surgery, or lab, for an example. And what I found was it was a lot of paper and a lot of phone calls. And because of that, there was also no documentation, and you really didn't have reporting, because it's hard to report on paper and phone calls. So what I did was I developed it was pretty primitive at that point, but it did the job, but developed the first version of the application. But essentially, when patients come in, they'd be able to check in at the front desk, and they the staff would be able to actually check the patient into the product. And it integrates with EHR systems. So it was basically just a single click and the front desk could check the patient in. Well, it immediately notified registration that that patient is available. And you could see the waiting room and how many, what patients are waiting for, and also how long the patients are waiting for their service. Well, registration would then register the patient in the EHR system. And whenever that was finished, it would actually notify the clinician that the patient's ready. So now the phlebotomist, the technologist, or the surgical staff would be able to act and get the patient and perform the clinical procedure. And it also went as far as if the patient had multiple services, it would actually let that clinician know, okay, send the patient to the next area. And the gap is there's situations where a patient would have one service, and as far as they knew, they were finished with their service, so they would go home. But the clinician didn't realize, oh, patient also has a lab script, send them to lab. So we really bridged a lot of the communication, made it very streamlined. Someone can look at it from a dashboard standpoint, exactly see how things are operating. But also from a reporting standpoint, you can trend and you can really identify those areas of improvement, from a staffing standpoint or even from a process standpoint. Okay, how can we streamline this process? So again, it started off as a fairly straightforward piece, but it was just really valuable. So yeah, that's kind of where the beginning started.
So is this something that you did on your own, or is this something that you did within within the as an employee?
Yeah, so I had developed a part of it as an employee. I did it on the side where I was working for that organization, and on the side I was developing this product. And then like I mentioned, I did go and I built that. And when I went to corporate and when I was also doing consulting, I was supporting it, but I wasn't really growing it, right? It's something I did, it fit the need. I was able to deploy it, but I never commercialized it. And looking back in hindsight, I wish I did earlier. I wish I realized that, what, it's more than just these hospitals. I need it. A lot of hospitals need it. But I thought it was kind of a niche. And I kind of questioned the value for other organizations. But in hindsight, it really could have been used everywhere. And I wish I kind of jumped on it earlier, but it took a few years for me to kind of go back to it and be like, you know what, I can do this better. I can commercialize it. And there's a whole market out there.
So I want to pause for just a second, because I imagine that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there just like you that have been working in the healthcare system and identified a problem or problems, and are very solution oriented, roll up their sleeves, create a way to solve that problem, for the company that they're working for whoever it is that they're serving, and question the value of that being a real viable business idea, and whether they should take the risk and do something with it or not. Whether it becomes a post-it story or whether it becomes of, oh man, I had that idea, I could have done A, B, and C with it. So how did you transition from this is kind of a side hustle to maybe I'm onto something here, and in commercializing it and turning it into a viable business?
Yeah. I think what it really came down to, and this has been years ago now, so I'm thinking through it. But I think what really helped is the healthcare organization I'm talking about that I started with. They've got maybe 30 facilities, and so word of mouth was really kind of what kind of spurred things. Where talking to the other hospitals, they were starting to voice to me, "Hey, how can we get it?" Right? Because they heard about these 3 hospitals having it and how it solved their solution. And then they these other hospitals heard about it and says, "Hey, how can we, we'd love to have it. How can we, get our hands on it?" Because ultimately they were either using access databases or spreadsheets. trying to track it. And that's kind
Yeah.
of where I realized that, okay, it's not just the hospital, these three hospitals that had an issue.
Yep.
Everybody has these kind of broken processes throughout the organization. I'm like, we can standardize that. And then I realized even organizations outside of that one also have that same challenge. So yeah, it's just kind of an eye opener. I was definitely really just focused on my career, and I
Yeah.
was definitely in that corporate career path.
Yep.
I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know if I knew the path to be an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
So I think it's just later, years later, I kind of realized the viability of that. Probably, I think I've met some people along the way that kind of gave me some of the courage of it is possible.
Yep.
And what I ended up doing was that's when I started doing some consulting, because the consulting gave me a little bit more flexibility in my
Hmm.
schedule. And so
Yep.
what I did was I did the consulting for a period of time, but in nights and weekends is where I was actually rewriting the product so that it could be commercialized, in the sense where I can plug and play, at
Hmm.
various facilities. And so I did that for, I think, about a year and a half, pretty much just working nonstop out of a hotel room. Because when the consulting, I had to travel every week. So 50
Right.
weeks a year, I was traveling. And then I was
Oh.
out of a Marriott hotel room. And
Uh-huh.
then nights and weekends, that's where I was actually just working on the commercialization of it. And it wasn't until I was able to get enough revenue where I could support myself, and then I stopped the consulting. So there was a kind of I wanted the boat to get fairly close to the dock before jumping.
Yep.
And that consulting just provided that little bit of flexibility to where I could kind of do both. I could support myself income wise and still have the capacity to work on this project. So
And
yeah.
again, I think you're speaking to, not everybody in our audience, but a huge chunk. When you think of the technologists, you think of physician innovators, nurse innovators, other clinicians that are, maybe have a technology or maybe just have process innovation, or experience innovation, but they've got some kind of innovative idea and are kind of teetering between, do I have something that's really something, or am I just, drinking my own Kool-Aid
Yep.
here? And
Yep.
kind of navigating that push pull of, especially if you're accustomed to being in corporate America and kind of transitioning that like big world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely yeah, it's definitely kind of a point in my career that I realized there's a lot I was learning and on the corporate path.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the freedom of creativity and ownership. And I knew I could do something good. I don't know if it was financially viable. I don't know if I'd fail or succeed. But I knew that I wanted to try,
Hmm.
because I don't, at certain points you only have one opportunity. And I feel like there was kind of there was a timing there of where I was in my career, where the market was, that it gave me the opportunity to try, right? And so yeah, it's kind of worked out that way.
Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit.
So what I love about your story is that you go from a side hustle to a successful business, but your story doesn't end there. It's really just getting started. So then you transition from, okay, I do have something that's commercially viable. I'm kind of building a business. Oh my gosh, I am building a business. And
Yep.
then what happens next?
Yeah. So, hired, began hiring employees.
Mhm.
As I was getting that revenue up and growing within the organizations, I was able to do that. Really start focusing on marketing and ended up bringing a salesperson on board.
Yeah.
And again, all learning experience for me because I wasn't really exposed to marketing or sales. So really just continued growing it organically and really bootstrapped it. So through the entire process. Yeah. So
You're
we
really
also
building something out of nothing, right? Where you kind of have one skill set that kind of qualifies you to be an entrepreneur. And then you're like, okay, now I need to do sales and marketing and finance and customer experience. And,
yeah yeah
and you start to grow your team.
yeah. Like I said, it was definitely a great learning experience for me, and it continues to be a learning experience. So it's when people say they wear one hat, it's there's a lot to it, and anywhere from the accounting to the strategic plan, like I
Yeah.
said, the marketing and sales and all the management. Yeah, it was basically kind of a one hat show for a while, but again, I was able to start kind of growing that team. But what we ended up doing was we continued growing our product. So knowing that this product had a very specific market, right?
Mhm.
What we didn't want to do is just get too comfortable with that particular segment. And so what we did was we continued expanding our product to make it more of a suite. And a couple of things that we did was we first developed a kiosk, a self-checking kiosk. So
Mhm.
either a floor standing kiosk or a tablet kiosk, then patients can walk in and check in themselves on the kiosk. And we continue taking that further. So we wanted to get more and more to the front end and more patient interactions. So the next step was appointment reminders. So we set up a whole product geared towards emailing, texting, or calling a patient to remind them of their appointment. And then we took it even a step further, which is we did the digital intake. This is where we were able to send a communication to the patient 2 weeks before their appointment. And from their phone, we can gather demographic information about the patient. We can collect driver's license, insurance. We can do patient estimation. We can collect payment. They can sign their documents. And ultimately, everything that they would have been asked for, either during pre-registration or when they came on site, we were able to collect it just ahead of time. So we continued kind of building out our product because we knew, we don't want to kind of be a one pony show. And larger health organizations want one vendor that can do a multitude of items. So we're very aggressive in expanding out our product suite. And
Mhm.
the great thing is it's one platform and one integration, one support, and it's all seamless. So because we have competitors that kind of have pieces of it, but we were under the we knew that hospitals just wanted a kind of a single solution for all of it and just wanted something turnkey. So so we were just very aggressive, over that time period and just growing our product suite.
And then you sold your company, you were acquired, you did a
Yeah.
joint venture.
Yeah. So one of the things that we had realized as we were continuing building out this process is a good example is patient estimates. That is a very complex thing to try to tackle, and to do it correctly and do it accurately is even harder. And with being patient focused, we knew we needed to have that information and other information to power our product. So we had a choice of either partnering with another company to feed that information into our product, or be acquired. And certainly wasn't on my radar to be acquired. But as I continued having conversations with AccuReg, it really made sense as we continued. And the reason why is because, going back to my first point, the healthcare systems are looking for one vendor, and we really needed tight integration for not only patient estimation, but for eligibility and other items. And we kind of came to the determination that really we needed to merge platforms. It was more than just data sharing to accomplish this, that we really needed to put them together to have that cohesiveness for not only the patients, but for the staff. So the staff doesn't have multiple products. And then even from a purchasing standpoint for the healthcare system, right? Having one solution that can not only handle your hospital workflow, but it can do all your patient-facing interactions, but also all your back-end patient access pieces. So, and AccuReg has a very good suite of products themselves. And, I really just love the vision. I love the vision of putting that together. And, I think, the value on both sides were there. So, so it really just, we came to that conclusion and really feel comfortable. And, I had ambitions to continue growing Zinig, but, again, one of those situations is the opportunity came up. It just seemed like a perfect fit. And it's just where I could see the vision of that one platform. So, so ended up being acquired. This was about 1.5 years ago in November. So hasn't been too long.
So I really just love your story because, and I also love your transparency and candidness about the journey. Sometimes we have guests come on the show and they try to act like, well, they had a plan and their plan was going to, be A, B, and C over the next 5 to 10 years. And I just executed the plan and it all came to fruition exactly how I anticipated. And we all know that that's a farce. No. None of us have lived that life.
Not at all. Not at all. And, it's interesting. So I've actually had some opportunities and having a couple other startups before this one. But I had some crossroads too. Is do I acquire money? At this point I was entirely bootstrapped up to that point. But do I try to get capital money, right? And and there's always pros and cons of doing that. Again, we could find some good partnerships and make it a win-win for both, or be acquired. So I really didn't want to go down the capital route at that particular point. And so, no, I did not have an end plan whatsoever. But this was right when COVID started as well. So, COVID started, and that was hard to do marketing and sales. At that, hospitals were really being conservative. They weren't going to trade shows. And so again, that wasn't my expertise. But I knew AccuReg was good and knows how to do marketing and sales. And I knew that's an area that I probably could have used more guidance on. And then COVID just really kind of made it even more difficult with that part. So I think that also, played a role in the timing of it. Knowing that COVID put a strain on some of the sales aspects.
Yeah. And I think that there's also power in your story too of what entrepreneurship and success can look like. It doesn't have to be, the next IPO for, $1 billion in order to have a success story. It doesn't have to be something, where you have 10 million users and 10 million customers. We can have ideas that turn into viable businesses if you're solving a real problem that someone's plural, a group of people, enough groups of people are looking to solve. And, kind of when I think of your story, I think of it going from a side hustle to a successful exit. And there's so many health innovators out there that haven't had this successful exit. Could you have done things maybe differently had you stayed on and built it more on your own and raised money? Who knows? But you really, it's brilliant and brave. You took a side hustle, you turned it into a viable business, and then sold that, was acquired, and continued to press into that same passion and mission and vision that you have, just in a different way, in a collaborative way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one thing that helped knowing that AccuReg was the right group to work with, was they wanted me to continue doing what I was doing in terms of being successful. So they weren't really looking at changing the formula on what I had started. And they really do give me a lot of autonomy within the organization. So, that I think that really also continue to be an entrepreneur at heart, even if I don't have a business at the moment. But again, I think providing or letting me have that freedom allows me to continue my vision. But now I have the resources and capital, and I have access to all their data and everything else to continue integrating and ultimately just driving that value to the to our customers. But I think that also really kind of also played a role, is that they wanted to keep the team together. The team that I started, they were all hired on. And so we are still a unit here in Orlando, and actually our CIO is now actually part of our office here in Orlando as well. So we got a great team. We've been able to grow it a lot over that time period. But it's been a great, the leadership's been great, and been really enjoying working with them. And I still feel a little bit like an entrepreneur in a way, just under a bigger umbrella. So
I think that's the key to success, because you have all of these larger, organizations like AccuReg, and then you have larger organizations that want to, go the path of mergers and acquisitions to be able to innovate, right? They're gigantic. They struggle with innovating internally. So they go out and they buy companies that maybe have a similar mission, and to try to, bring that innovation in. And most often the story that we hear is everything that made that company so successful and innovative gets kind of eroded by the culture of the large organization. And it sounds like this team is really smart in allowing you to kind of, function as an entrepreneur, and really being able to retain all of the fast, flexible, nimble, kind of trying stuff, and having it break and fail, and kind of continuing to grow and innovate, almost like an incubator for future innovation, without smothering you with all of those traditional systems and processes and bureaucracy that tends to just, kill innovation.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then ultimately we're all kind of aligned in terms of our mission. And I think that's what really made it, because, talking with the CIO, and we were kind of whiteboarding the visions, we just realized we have the same vision. I mean, like, I knew exactly what he was going to say next. So
you
it's
don't hear that all the time, Shawn. That is rare.
Yeah. So I'm like, wow, like it was really great to have that. I think it was kind of just exciting for both sides, that, we were just such on the same page with it. So yeah. So anyways, it's been a great journey. And, ultimately, I'm really happy about what we're doing in the industry, right? Is we're really interacting with patients, and, from an early start of their appointments, but really, guiding the patients through healthcare. And, you hear it again, and, quite often, regarding, sorry, I think there's noise in the background. Can you hear it?
No.
You can't hear it? Okay. There's noise outside the window here. But there are, patients are often confused, moving through a healthcare organization. And so, with the technology that we have, we're really just guiding that patient. We're providing, timely information to the patient.
Yeah.
We're providing them what that current step is, but we're also letting them know what that next step is of here, this is what you should expect. And because we don't want patients to be lost, in that healthcare system, because not every patient is fully understands how to read a patient estimate and, everything that we're asking for. So, I really think that we're making a good impact in healthcare by streamlining that.
So when you think about the growth of, the next phase of growth for the company, kind of being future focused here for a minute, what's next? What's on the horizon in your commercialization journey?
Yeah. So some of our focuses is getting some into the clinical aspects of it. So right now we do a lot of demographics and financial pieces. But there are pieces of information from a clinical standpoint, like medications and allergies, and things like that, that we're looking at incorporating into our product. And that way we can satisfy patient access as well as the clinical aspect of it. So really, that's really our one of our big focuses right now, is really kind of building in some of those pieces into that process. But we're continuing to really expand. One of the other pieces that we're looking at working with is self-scheduling. Again, moving, right now we basically start where, appointment is made, but we're looking even before that. So when the patient's really a consumer and not necessarily a patient, how can we interact with the patient at that point? And so we do have an estimator tool that even if you're a consumer, you could use the estimation tool, but really just looking, continue to move forth and, expanding that. And then the other part is even post-visit, being able to communication after they have an appointment, and really keep them in the loop. So really it's all about end to end, as a consumer, to when, post service, how do we, again, just streamline that entire process, keep the patient informed and engaged through the entire thing. So, so those are kind of some of the areas that we're looking at continuing to expand in.
That's great. So you think about the other technologists out here or innovators that don't see themselves as entrepreneurs, as we kind of wrap up here, what is some of the advice that you would give them, kind of in hindsight, and the lessons that you've learned along the way?
Okay. Well, I probably need a full hour to talk about all the lessons. Hindsight's 2020. I think the biggest lesson is, for me, is I probably undervalued the value that the solution I put together. I knew it was kind of a niche, but I thought it was a niche for only that one customer. And I think in hindsight, I wish I kind of worked with other hospitals earlier on, because I think I would have realized, oh, you're having a similar challenge. Actually, I already have a solution for it. But I just wasn't on my radar. In hindsight, I'm not sure why. Maybe I think it was just more focused on that corporate path.
Yep.
Which was great experience. So it wasn't a bad path. But in hindsight, yeah, probably should have maybe had a little more research in the rest of the market. And like I said, my mindset, just because it wasn't quite there yet. It was definitely just a local, and I didn't have that global kind of mindset. But yeah, for anybody who's looking at starting something, and they found a particular client, that they're growing with, definitely don't undervalue it. And even if it's the tiniest of niches, there's value, elsewhere, but you can always grow it as well. So, if I could have told myself that years ago, who knows where where things would be. But I think that's one of if I had to choose one, that would probably be the largest one.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you sharing your story. How do folks get a hold of you if they want to follow up with you after the show?
Yeah. So the best way is actually just reaching out to me on LinkedIn. You can contact me at Shawn. It's SHAWN, and then Zimmerman. Yeah, feel free to invite me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and attention. To get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who shared the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of Health Innovators.